Welcome to the Life of Being podcast, where we talk about all things life from a healthcare perspective all around the world. I'm your host, Kelly Tan, and in each episode, we'll dive into stories, science, and wisdom to help you live well, think deeper, and express life fully. Let's begin. Today, we're so excited to have Dr. Patrick Sim joining us from Australia. Dr. Patrick is a chiropractor, educator, and leader with nearly 3 decades of experience spanning private practice, association leadership, regulatory boards, and chiropractic education. As the inaugural president of the Australian Chiropractic College, he has been instrumental in advancing principled chiropractic education, and in 2024 was named Chiropractic of the Year by the Australian Chiropractic Association. Dr. Patrick, welcome to the show.
It's wonderful to be here, Kelly. Great to spend some time with you.
That's great. I know that you've quite busy yourself and you've taken a little bit of time to share your story, so it's an honor to be sharing your story in this platform. Shall we start by you sharing your story in terms of how you got into chiropractic and also your journey into building Australia Chiropractic College?
Yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of chiropractors have a miracle story as to how they got into the profession. Mine's probably a miracle that I'm in the profession, if anything, because I haven't quite got that same story. I won't say that it's luck, but I started out having a strong interest in nature. I love David Attenborough shows and documentaries like that. Always have been fascinated by the body. So when I was at school, I was thinking about, like you do, you'd think about medicine. I thought about physiotherapy. I hadn't really considered chiropractic until the physiotherapist who lived down the road from us told my mum, don't be a physiotherapist, be a chiropractor, which I found was a fascinating thing. So thank you very much to Jennifer Renison, whatever she may be nowadays. If it weren't for her, then perhaps we wouldn't be looking, I wouldn't become a chiropractor. So from there, myself and my mum did a fair bit of work on trying to find out where we should be doing that. When I say myself and my mum, it's probably more my mum than me. I was much more interested in playing sport and those sorts of things. And so really, she was the one who made the phone calls, did the work, and eventually I was enrolled in Macquarie University's program. Now, at the time, I could study in Adelaide, and Adelaide is in a separate state to where Macquarie University is, and Macquarie University is in Sydney. So we're about a 2-hour flight away from Sydney. And at the time, you could do a science degree in Adelaide and then do some night classes whilst you do that science degree, which would then prepare you to go into the master's program at Macquarie. So that's what I did, myself with maybe another 10 other students here in Adelaide. And then I went to Macquarie to do my master's degree. But I don't recall there being anything in that education that actually prepared me to be a chiropractor. I did love the sciences. I did love learning about the body, but I was still spending a lot more time playing football and socializing than I was being very serious about my profession. So yeah, again, there's no real miracle there. And it wasn't until I'd been working for a couple of years as a chiropractor where I probably actually did more time doing massage and trigger pointing and taking payments, occasionally being a chiropractor, that I got a job back in Adelaide. And that was the first time I recall really learning about what chiropractic was. So this chiropractor I got this job with, he started talking about the philosophy of chiropractic and in particular, the triune of life, the way that intelligence meets matter via force, and that's what gives rise to life. And so exploring that philosophy, I started to realize that there was a philosophy attached to chiropractic, and that philosophy lined up with my own. And so it wasn't like I found chiropractic. It was like I realized the thing that I was doing had a set of values that reflected my own. And I think when you start realizing that, your job is no longer your job becomes your vocation. And it was very easy to become committed to what I was doing after that point.
You did mention similar things, like when the value of chiropractic is lined up with your own. What is the value of it? And did that change over time now that you're 3 decades in the profession?
No, I think it's the fact that it's weak to say this, but it's still true. Chiropractic is a natural way of being human. It doesn't rely on artificial means. It doesn't rely on surgery, and it doesn't rely on medication. All it needs is a person's body to do a better job. And that's really all we do. So we find a subluxation. That subluxation is limiting that person's ability to be at their best. We do what we can to minimize or reduce or remove that subluxation. And when that occurs, that body works better. And it's not a surprise, I think, when you look at it from that perspective, that so many amazing things happen when someone sees a chiropractor. So it's not about the treatment of anything. It's not about the cure of anything. It's about the restoration of what should naturally be there anyway. And so if you think about this from a even an environmental perspective, if you remove the pollution in an environment, the environment will naturally get better. If you look at a waterway and you take out all the rubbish and you take out all the toxins, then eventually that environment restores itself. You get fish, you get drinking water, you get the right algae, you get the right balance of things. So nature has this way of restoring itself once the interference is removed. And I think that's the philosophy that I resonate with. And it makes so much sense to me.
When you mentioned that, you're working in a practice that actually talks about chiropractic philosophy, and for the first time ever, you've heard of that word. And then what was the step for you to take to actually truly, deeply understand what chiropractic actually is? And then it sounds like from that point, you're certain in what chiropractic is. And from then, you actually build a college that teaches that. So tell me your story in terms of what's going on there.
I can be very poetic at times, Kelly, so I hope this makes sense to people. I don't know if anyone's listening to this. I would ask you to look out your nearest window, and I just want you to have a look at the nearest plant or tree you can see and really look at it. And when you look at it, you start to think, geez, that's amazing. I mean, how is it that leaf exists on that tree? And then look what that leaf is doing. Look how it's taking in sunlight and it's converting it to energy via this process, and that thing now is living because it's doing these things. So when you truly stop and you look at something and you understand it, or at least you try to understand it, or even if you don't understand it, you can just appreciate how magnificent it is. That's the moment. So people, I've no doubt that regardless of what philosophy you say you practice from as a chiropractor, if you're prepared to stop and look and assess the changes that are really happening to people under your care, whether you see them once or whether you see them for the whole of their lifetime, you'll see the same changes that I see, because the spine is the same in every person. The nervous system is the same in every person. It's just whether or not the chiropractor who's looking at those things is seeing the same things. And so I think irrespective of the philosophy you say you are, the changes you're getting are going to be the same that I see. So it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of being aware, and it's a matter of looking for the change or expecting the change. And that's not some sort of metaphysical hoo-ha. That's actually the thing. It's, again, like looking out the window and realizing how amazing that tree or that plant is and seeing it happen. So I think that's what I got from this position, was a realization or a better appreciation of what chiropractic was, and then looking for the changes. So starting to expect there to be, yes, symptomatic changes. At a deep level, yes, movement changes. At a deep level, yes, neurological changes. And neurological is not just paresthesia. Neurological is how the whole body works. So it's not just the affective state of the body, it's the affective state, it's emotion, it's thought processes, it's confidence, it's all these things which change under chiropractic. And I think once you start to look for it and you start to see it, then your confidence starts building around it. And you know that when you do this application of force, which creates an adjustment in the body, then that body does do amazing things. So when I started to understand chiropractic from that perspective, my world did start changing, because my whole view of things is different. It's not to see those things weren't there before. It's just I was seeing them differently and seeing the tree for what it actually was, rather than just a green thing out in the landscape. When your perspective on something changes, then your values start becoming clearer. I actually went through a divorce around that time because, again, I realized that, again, my values didn't line up with hers. So it wasn't a surprise that our relationship was where it was at. It also meant that when I did meet someone else whose values did line up with mine, after struggling to have kids, it's not a surprise that her and I did have children. And I think, that was, again, an indication to me that, there is something intelligent in the universe. And I'm not talking a God here. I'm saying that there's this ability for things to come out of seemingly nothing, that you can propagate life in the right circumstances, in the right environment, with the right person. And when you start to see the world from that perspective and you understand your perspective is from your philosophy, then, Kelly, what would you do? What would you do if you thought that there was a risk of people losing that philosophy? For me, it was sitting on a board meeting. I was on the national board at the time, and we decided to drop our core values. And the core values at the time were written around how, amazing and intelligent the universe was, and how that intelligence comes through in how amazing and incredible and intelligent our bodies are. And if that intelligence somehow gets interfered with, then the bodies don't work so well. And our job of chiropractors is to find where these irritations occur and remove them so that body can work better. And so we decided to throw that out because we were under some political pressure. And the realization of what a mistake that was then drove me very hard to bring it back, because that philosophy is so important to me, and by extension, so important to so many other chiropractors. And I had just on a whim decided to get rid of it. So I fought very hard to try and bring it back in the association, and that failed. I tried very hard to bring it back in a whole range of other ways. But in the end, the only clear pathway, to me at least, was, and the only way to make it last longer and not be thrown out like I had thrown it out in the association, was through the establishment of a very solid organisation that teaches chiropractic like I know it. And that's where the Australian Chiropractic College comes from.
What would you say is the challenge for this perspective change for chiropractors that are not principled or understanding there's much more than just mechanical side of things?
I think they're weak. I think they are weak. I think they want to rely on hiding behind someone else's thoughts, what they call research, because they're too scared to have their own. They're too scared to look, like I've just said, to look for the change, to expect that change, to embrace the fact that chiropractic existed for 120 years, not because it's a sham, but because it works. And I was having a conversation this morning with one of my graduates, and she said, if you went back and you had a look at those first 100 chiropractors, what were they doing? And I'll tell you what they're doing. They're finding subluxation and they were removing it. And those people were healthier because of it. So chiropractic is not any more complicated than that. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I don't care if you use the word subluxation or not, but if you're doing the same sort of thing, then you're still a chiropractor. And I think those people who call themselves evidence-based or call themselves, I don't know, what's another term they would use, Kelly? More scientific,
mechanistic,
or whatever. Really, I think they are not thinking for themselves. They get in a room and someone says how quacky Patrick Sim is, and therefore they all decide to agree the same thing. But they haven't looked into it. They don't really understand. I doubt they've been to a chiropractor who thinks or practices in the way that I would. And so I think in calling themselves evidence-based, that is more of a joke than anything, because they're not doing the evidence themselves. They're not researching it for themselves. And this is why I think that side is a weak side.
You did mention about critical thinking and also identity development when you're talking about the ACC. How is it different in ACC, and how do you educate the students to be able to discern what is right and what's wrong and what is true?
Well, this is philosophy, isn't it? And ACC's got a long way to go. I have no doubt it's the best program in Australia, if not sort of Asia, but it's got a long way to go. We are great, but we are a long way from perfect. And I can say that because I'm a critical thinker. I know where it needs to be, and I know where it's also not strong. But when we're talking about critical thinking, that's not a scientific discipline. That's a philosophical discipline. So philosophy is asking why. So that's a fundamental philosophical question, is why. And if we ask why all the time, then we start to build a better sense of knowledge. So one of the arms of philosophy is epistemology, which is how do you know what you know? So for us to be true critical thinkers, that's the thing we have got to ask ourselves. How do you know what you know? Where are you making assumptions? Or what assumptions have you made that you don't even know you've made? And again, this is, I think, a problem for all chiropractors. Those who call themselves principled or vitalistic, they also struggle with this. They're not true critical thinkers. Those who are on the other side, they're not true critical thinkers either. Both of them, they kowtow to a god of some sort, the god of what they're calling evidence, or the god of the 33 principles, or whatever it should be. But a true critical thinker is able to pull apart the evidence and find out what exists after that. So are you prepared to challenge the status quo? And when you do, what do you find? So I took the 33 principles and I pulled them apart. And after that, they still made sense to me. I could take someone who calls themselves an evidence-based chiropractor and ask them a series of questions, and they will fall apart and not hold up to the scrutiny. So how can they be true critical thinkers if that's the case? So an example would be, if you go to what you think is an evidence-based program, what's the evidence that program actually works?
I think I've heard the answer before in your other interview, but it's more on the students that came out and how great
exactly. What is the purpose of a chiropractic program? Is it to produce chiropractors? So are these programs actually tracking on the success rate of those graduates? Because I would say they don't, and I don't think they care. So for me, that's critical thinking at its worst. Call yourself an evidence-based program, but then not do the research to find out whether or not your program is actually working.
And they won't do it if they don't really care, isn't it? In terms of how things are trajectory.
How important? Is the research they are doing more important than the graduates they're producing?
Ooh. Man, Dr. Patrick is putting fires.
Well, I think this is the thing. And these are questions to have. We should have these questions as a profession. What's the purpose of us doing something that other professions do? And I can see why a number of these institutions don't think there should be a separation between chiropractors and physiotherapists, that we all should just be a manual therapy group, because that's where a lot of them would go. And I understand that thinking when they're coming from this perspective of, well, there's no such thing as subluxation. An adjustment is a load of crap. Therefore, we should do more dry needling, more soft tissue, and more rehab. And if that's the case, then what's the purpose of being a chiropractor? Because every other profession does that too. So I can understand then why there would be this crossover or this lack of understanding of the difference between the professions. But it's very different when you say that a chiropractor understands the body's smart, is looking for anything that is interfering with that body's ability to be smart and removing it. In particular, we look for interference to the nervous system, and that tends to happen mainly through the spine. And we're the only people who do that. And so we are distinct, we are separate, and we are effective, and the public does love us, okay? And we are accepted, and we are mainstream. All of these things are true for us when we do chiropractic as it is.
If this is such an amazing thing, how is it that not everyone understands this?
Well, I've been doing some interviews of my own recently, so I'm doing this professional doctorate, effectively a PhD, and I'm asking people that question. What do you think is the biggest threat to the profession? And to a T, they've all pretty much said the loss of our identity, the loss of our philosophy. Because without that, then who are we? And then if I'd ask them, well, how is it that the identity is being lost? What do you think they say, Kelly?
Compromising to the public, per se?
Yeah, through our educational systems. So it's our programs which are the vector for our extinction. So in Australia, there's the ACC, and there's 4 other programs. ACC is the only one that would teach philosophy or an identity that would be consistent with how I would practice. All the others, which have, or the lion's share of all the students, are teaching something else. So what happens when those graduates get into practice? Like, what's the identity they carry? When those graduates then move into positions of influence, like on boards and committees, what's the view or chiropractic that they carry with them? And so it's not a surprise then that the profession is where it is in Australia. So the problem is educational institutions.
Do you see, education plays a huge role, but even in some principled students that has studied in principled educational institutes, say like in the US, sometimes they come out still not understanding or practicing principled chiropractic. And where do you think that is the main issue then, other than having the opportunity to get exposed to what chiropractic actually truly is?
Well, I had a very sad realization when we graduated our first class of chiropractors. I realized that the ACC is never going to be able to do the job that we wanted it to do. So our concern was over the profession. But what the educational process does is produce graduates. The bit that happens afterwards, those first 3-5 years, is so important for what those graduates do with what they have learned. So this is where, can the profession take what we can produce and can it guide it appropriately? Can it be there to answer its questions, to help it when it falls over, to guide its thrust, to help it with its development? So the graduation gets us to point 0. And I think it gives you the best chance of producing a chiropractor, but it doesn't force that student to become a chiropractor. And of course, if we're teaching critical thinking, we don't want to force anyone to do anything. The other thing the education does is we know that the best indicator of a chiropractor's practice philosophy is the institution that they've come from. We're also finding that most students who are referred to us by chiropractors. So there is this cyclical thing. So if you come in, if you're looking for a certain place to practice a certain way, because you've come from a chiropractor who has this traditional chiropractic view, they will come to ACC and they will more likely come out and want to practice that way. But if we take someone who doesn't want to do that, then we can't force them into that. Okay? And we don't want to do that either. We want to give them all the opportunities. Yes. And I still think if you wanted to come to ACC and become a more medical style chiropractor, you could do that. But while you're with us, we'll make sure you are the best graduate who can do Gonstead. You're the best graduate who can do SOT. You're the best graduate who can do diversified. And if you then want to go off and do dry needling or anything else, then that's great. That's up to you. But we will focus very clearly on our philosophy and who we are as chiropractors.
What would you say is the current challenge in the chiropractic in Australia or in ACC specifically? And what is the trajectory that you're hoping to in, say, passing a legacy on to the next generation?
Well, we're playing a long game. It's taken us a long time to set up the college. I started working on ACC about 2013, 2014. We only graduated our first students in 2025. And in order to do that, we had to raise sort of $7 million. And, I had to age very, very quickly too. So it's taken a lot of effort to do that. But that's because we're committed to the future. And as I said before, the trajectory of the profession as I saw it was poor because the educational institutions weren't producing chiropractors. And so the fact that we've now set up the ACC helps that somewhat. But it's not the only solution. The profession itself has to improve now. So we'd like to think that ACC, that chiropractors worldwide are greater because we exist. Not just our graduates, but we'd like to think that all chiropractors now have to step up, because I think our graduates are going to be way better than any other graduate, which means when they get a job in a practice that's used to taking a graduate from somewhere else, that practice won't know how to do with them because effectively it's not going to be good enough and those graduates are going to leave. And so I think it'll force the whole profession to get better because they can't anymore say, oh, we'll teach you philosophy or we'll teach you how to adjust, because these graduates are coming in with those skills already. So I think we have shifted the balance. And here's a statistic for you. We've graduated 42 chiropractors from ACC. That represents 0.6% of all chiropractors in Australia. So it's a minuscule percentage of the total number of chiropractors, but we know that our footprint and our impact is way larger than that, way larger. So I do think that we've done what we can to take the future back into our hands, and we're trying to take control there. It's not up to us to change the other institutions or to change the profession, but I do think that will happen as a result of us existing.
100%. It's definitely a long game. It's where you've planted the seeds and the tree will grow to a huge oak tree. It's definitely changed the trajectory and raised the standards.
Well, I'd like to think so. And again, we've got to get better because we do care about our graduates.
Yes.
And in speaking with them, I know that there are still holes and flaws and problems. And I see it even when I look at the institution itself. But again, that's not to say that I do believe that we are the highest quality institution in Australia, if not Asia. And I think New Zealand's a very good second best. I do. I love them. They are the premier institution in the world without doubt. So, I think I did say to our graduates with our first graduation ceremony that, when I'm gone and when my generation of chiropractors are gone, because the one above us are now starting to go. Jerry Clummer's died. Guy Rickman has died. David Koch has just recently died. They are moving on. They've done their time. They've done their bit. But when me and my generation has gone, you and your generation are going to do your bit.
What will be one thing you want your graduates to take away from knowing you as a person, or not just ACC?
To serve. So I do this for selfish reasons. And those selfish reasons are I want my kids' great-grandkids to have access to chiropractic. So these are people who won't know me. So I do it selfishly for my own genes, but in doing so, I'm serving them. Perhaps you could argue, well, in setting this up, perhaps I haven't served my own family, and that's probably true. I missed my son's first day of walking, missed birthdays, I've missed a lot. And so perhaps I could have done that better. But if I hadn't done this, then the cost would have been way greater. And so I'd like to think that my graduates understand what it costs to serve and that it's worth paying 10 times over.
You did also mention ACC has opened in Melbourne also following changes politically. What actually prompted you to open another institute in Melbourne other than political stuff going on?
Oh, yeah, there are a couple of things. So the first thing was Adelaide is a smaller city in Australia. We've got about 1.5 million people, and it's traditionally conservative. Our financial projections around building the college are based on a certain number of students starting with us. And so we were looking at, okay, so are we going to get the minimum number of students this year or not? At the same time, we're looking at Melbourne. We know RMIT is not going to take any students anymore. We know at some point another program is going to start operating there. And so we start thinking, well, does another campus in Melbourne, does that mean we have to get twice as many students to cover off on our costs, or is it more or less than that? And so when we started doing the numbers, we realized that it's not that much more to meet minimum requirement to open a second campus in Melbourne. When Melbourne is Australia's largest and fastest growing city, why would you not go there? Why would you not go there? So we were very critical, again, applied critical thinking to this. We looked at it very seriously. We did a very strong risk analysis. We involved local chiropractors in our decision making as well to think about whether or not we'd be supported. And on the basis of that, we had to make a decision. And to us, the clear decision was to open in Melbourne. And as it's turned out, it's been a great thing. So we took in 25 students in our first year there. I think this year we'll take in 30 plus students, whereas a similar program that's also just opened in Melbourne only took in 8 this year. So, I think that our quality and our reputation is being way better understood by chiropractors now.
And it's gonna slowly rippling and growing as the seed is planting all over the world.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, I'm going to challenge you now. Take me back to the most life-changing conversation you ever had. What is the greatest advice you ever received in your career?
In my career? Okay. Well, there are so many of them. I can still remember this chiropractor talking to me about the triune of life. So now, I don't know if that was the first conversation, but I remember getting so enthralled with this triangle and understanding the geometries of it and how important that was. That was a very important moment. I then spent a lot of time with a coach, a guy called Mark Postles. Whilst that wasn't a singular conversation, it was an ongoing commitment to my own development through Mark's guidance, which was so important in me understanding the world better, understanding chiropractic better too. But chiropractic is just a metaphor for how we want to live our lives in any case. So it is a process of self-development. And that time I've spent with Mark, and he's on our board now. So I'm always having conversations with him. So that conversation is ongoing. So perhaps I can say the conversation that started about 25 years ago is continuing. And as I continue to develop my understanding of myself and the world and chiropractic, Mark Postles has a lot to do with that.
What sort of resources or one book that you usually recommend to people if they want to start the journey of understanding things?
It's so funny to ask that question because I think if I was, say, a student, I would start something very simple. And you know what? I would go to Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. I think I would start there. And whilst he's not a chiropractor, I think what you start to get through what he's talking about is this idea of philosophy. And he knows chiropractors very, very well. And he'll say very clearly that what he's talking about in his book is the same sort of intelligence as what chiropractors talk about. Again, it's not necessarily a deity. We're talking now the fact that the universe has this ability to become more complex, and that's, I think, what he's done. And it's an engaging book. It's a fascinating book. If you want to do more chiropractic research or more chiropractic thinking, then I would go to Fred Barge, Life Without Fear. I would actually keep away from the green books. I think they're too hard to read and understand. You may want to understand the 33 principles, but even then, like, we'd have discussions philosophically about whether or not all of those principles stand up, which I don't think they do. But I think there are other things that we can look at nowadays.
Yes.
We don't have to go back to the old days. Those old tombs are very, very important. But chiropractic is true irrespective of whether or not we use a 1910, 1927 or a 1998 text. The concept is the same and is eternal.
It's the principle that's timeless, isn't it?
Exactly.
And we're coming towards the end. I know it's just like lots of knowledge and wisdom coming up from yourself there, and I can talk for hours and hours more, but I'll respect your time. Where would be the best place to find you personally and also find more about ACC?
ACC has a website, and we do accept students from all over the world, and we can offer RPL and credit transfers if that's of interest to you. We have an event coming up August the 29th in Melbourne, and very happy to show people around if they're interested in transferring to ACC. We have campuses in Adelaide and Melbourne, or you could reach out to me in any number of social media ways. I'd be very happy to connect with you.
That's perfect. I'll leave all the information in the description below. People, if you're listening to this, you're fired up, you want to know about this, reach out to Dr. Patrick, brilliant person to speak with. Now, before we wrap things up, what will be one word, one phrase you'd like to lift the listeners to?
If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly.
Yeah, that's your favorite quote. Hey, I've heard it before. But yeah, that's great. That's a super great way to end the podcast over there. Definitely thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you soon in the next event.
Thanks, Kelly. Great to speak to you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Life of Being podcast. Let us know what is your one key takeaway from this episode. And if this conversation inspired you, share it with a friend who might find it helpful today. Until next time, take care of your health and take care of your being.